Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen. I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. Today we're talking about the realities of being a writer. Now, predominantly my experience is in traditional publishing, but this also applies to self-published authors and what it means to be an author in the 21st century. Now, in the past, and there are some exceptions to what I'm going to talk about, someone could put out one book and that would be it for their entire lifespan. They could live off the money and just do whatever they want and became very famous. And there are a number of authors within all genres, including fantasy that I write in, who have written one or two books and it's made them a household name, or at least a name that is well known within the fantasy genre. And from that, they've achieved great success, great acclaim, great sales, which meant that they can sit back and do whatever they want, if they want to carry on writing or not. Some choose to just stop. They've done something and they don't want to do any more. Others go on and produce many other books. So the other reason I wanted to bring this up is very recently, and just as this video is coming out, the open submission windows for Angry Robot books will be happening. They are a science fiction and fantasy publisher, and they have said this year, like they've done many years in the past, if you are an unagented writer with a finished science fiction, fantasy or horror novel, you can submit your novel to them for consideration. So I wanted to talk about this because I've just done an interview with Sarah J. Daly. She sent her novel in during the 2020 open submission window, and she and one other author, Ron Walters, were picked up. And so that's two authors, two books that came from that entire period. And my estimate is that they had about 1,000 submissions. So the odds at that time, I'd probably say, are probably a bit higher now. We're 1 in 500. Now there could be 1 in 600 or more. And you're probably thinking, those are terrible odds. But I'm here to tell you, actually, those are really good odds. And I'll tell you why. If you don't know my story, there's a video on my channel that talks about how I found an agent. But very briefly, it took me many years and many books before I was picked up. And on the year that I sent my book in, which became my debut novel, Battle Mage, my agent had several thousand submissions. And on that year, she took in, I think, 5 new clients or even 6 new clients. So the odds for me at that time were 1 in a couple of thousand at least. So 1 in 500 is actually really good odds. And other agents would have lots more submissions and therefore the odds will change. But 1 in 500 is really good. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you do get picked up. As I said, when I spoke to Sarah, she spoke about not only the process of editing the novel and getting the book out, but what is expected of her going forward now that she is a published author. And this is something that will happen to you and everybody else who has a novel out, whether it is traditionally published or self-published. You put out a novel, let's say it does fairly well, you get great positive reviews, a lot of critical acclaim, and everyone seems very excited by it. With me and with other authors, at some point during the process of getting the book ready for publication, your agent and your editor at the publisher will turn to you and say, so what are you working on next? What's the next book? Now obviously if it's a series, a trilogy, as mine was in my case, they were sort of saying, how are you getting on with that second novel? Where are you up to? How's the first draft coming? And even if I had done a standalone novel and we'd been working on it and it was going well, they still would have turned around and said, so what are you doing next? What's the next book? What is it about? Because being an author in today's society really is all about the next book, working on the next book. And so I've said this to many people, that even if you send this novel in to Angry Robot this year and maybe you do it in a future year and you're watching this video much later, my suggestion would be, once that novel has gone off, try to forget about it. I know that's really hard because you're just going to be waiting for a response, but it could be a few months before they get back to you. It could be 6 months, depending on how many submissions they get. But my suggestion is always to start on the next project as soon as you can. Take a little break, recharge your batteries, clear your mind a bit, but then move forward onto the next book, because you have to. That's part of the game. Readers expect you to produce more books, so does your agent and so does your editor. And that's what it means to be an author for most of us. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are exceptions of people who can put out 1 or 2 books and either they stall or they've finished a series and they never produce any more. And you can think about some of the big household names who you know about, whether it's Stephen King or somebody like that. They continue to put out books because they love what they do. Now, in theory, Stephen King could have retired decades ago and not produced any more work, but he keeps doing it because he loves to write. It's just how he is. He has to get these stories out. It's what he does. The flip side for most of us who are called mid-list writers is that we don't make enough money to be able to write full time. That's just the reality for the vast majority of writers, whether it's traditional or self-published. And this is something that's a bit of a bitter pill that some people don't want to accept, and they're thinking they're going to be the next Stephen King, George R. R. Martin, whatever it might be. And I have to say there's a very, very, very small chance you will, but in most likely circumstances you won't. Most, if not all of the writers that I know have full-time or part-time jobs. I also have a day job as well because none of us make enough money to write full-time. The goal for me is not to get rich from my books. The goal is I make enough money from my writing that I can do it full-time and focus on my work more. That's just the reality. If you think about something like Hollywood, you think about actors, think about all of the top movie stars that you know, then you think about some of the kind of B-list actors and C-list actors that you'll probably recognize their name, you've seen them in a bunch of films, but there again, they're not the people who are sitting in the huge mansions up in the Hollywood Hills. These are kind of jobbing actors, if you like, that they get a good chunk of money, and if they didn't do anything else, it might last them a few months, maybe a couple of years, if they're very frugal, but at the end of the day, that money runs out, and they have to get another job. So you see these actors cropping up all of the time because they're working actors. They do it because they love the craft, but also that's just the reality. And it's the same with being an author. We're expected to put out books regularly. Now, some authors do it 1 book a year. Maybe some can do it 1 every couple of years. If you're further up the pecking order, then you can take time out to spend working on the book a bit longer, maybe spend a couple of years doing some research, planning it out much more carefully or whatever it might be, and then the book comes out. But then there are some, as I said, some really big authors that put out 1 book a year, 2 books a year, because they just love what they do. Lee Childs, he's the creator of Jack Reacher, and he has 26 Jack Reacher novels. And I recently saw an interview that he did from a few years ago with Stephen King. And as part of that interview, the two of them were talking about his Jack Reacher books. And someone had said, would you ever consider going and doing a book something completely different? And he said, yeah, I have thought about it, but also my readers kind of expect a new Jack Reacher book. And I know it's going to do fairly well, and I know there's an audience for it, so I could do something completely different, but I have no idea how it's going to be received. And meanwhile, all of the Jack Reacher fans are going to be sat there disappointed. Now, I'm paraphrasing what he said. You can find it online. But he likes what he's doing. He likes the character. So he's kept going forward and kept more stories to tell within that space and with that character. And, if he didn't want to, he could have stopped years ago as well. So there's 2 sides of the coin for all writers. There's the business side, which you have to kind of be aware of, and then there's the creative element. Now, we all want to be able to live off our work. That's the goal, really. But if you're writing with the purpose of getting rich, I hate to break it to you, but it's not going to happen. It's a very, very small chance that you will become one of these really big names that everyone knows and everyone talks about. The reality is, just like the Hollywood thing, there are thousands of actors who aren't Tom Cruise. There are thousands of writers that aren't George Martin or Stephen King. Many writers live in a household with 2 incomes, themselves, that they have the day job and then money from their writing, and also their partner, husband, wife, whoever it might be, has another income. And between the 2 of them, they're able to make ends meet. And that's the reality for all writers that I know. All of my friends, all of them are within that space. And it's the same in other genres too. So if you had sent your book off to Angry Robot and now you're sat back thinking, well, what do I do next? You should start work on that next book, because if they say yes, they want to read a full manuscript, and if they say, right, we want to publish your book, at some point during the process, they're going to ask you for the next book, the next idea, ask you how it's going. If you get rejected and you've already started on something else, then that's good. That shows that you're someone who is serious, you're intent upon improving your craft and getting better as a writer, and you're on the path. You understand that it's about producing a body of work. It's not about producing one book and then sitting back and swimming around in your money like Scrooge McDuck, because, well, that'd be weird anyway, but nobody does that. Not even the really big writers do that, as far as I know. Anyway, so it's about moving forward, doing a book, improving on it, getting better, and doing the next one and getting better. Because readers, as much as we love them, will read a book and go, oh, that was good. Where's the next one? Whether it's the next one in the series or the next one from that author. They don't really care that it took you however many years to grind it out, to find an agent, to find a publisher, to get it out on the bookshelves. They don't know any of that most of the time. They can find it out if they really want to. They can Google it. They can find out more about your backstory. But most readers are not like that. There are those who are very interested in all of that, booktubers and many other people. But a lot of people just walk into a bookshop, pick up a book, read it, like it, go out and try and find the next one. That's the kind of reality. As much as we spend time online on social media, on YouTube, talking to people, a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people are just not that way focused. They want to read a book and they want to see the next one. And that's what you have to do. You have to produce a body of work. So if it's not apparent already, then I'll make it clear. Rejection is part of the game. It happens to all of us. You can even get a literary agent and then not end up with a book deal. I've done a video on that as well, so I'll put a link in here so you can see it. The other thing I should note is that whenever I do a video that hits a nerve, then a lot of people, well, a handful of people, hit the dislike button. You can't see the numbers, but I can see it behind, because they don't want to face the reality. Like I've spoken about things in the past about word count and swearing and a number of other things, and some people just get frustrated because they think they know better. Great, go out there, prove me wrong, become the next George Martin, the next Stephen King, whatever. I'll applaud you and admit my fault. But reality is, you're not gonna be that guy, that girl. This is just how it is. So if you can come to terms with that, if you can come to terms with rejection, if you can come to terms with the fact that you have to produce more than one book and you're only as good as your last novel with readers, then they want you to get better every time. They want something that's as good as last time, that's the same, but also different. And you've got to move forward and you've got to keep getting better. And that's the reality of being a writer these days. So I look forward as ever to your comments about this video and all of my videos. But I'll be back next week with another video.